Hi and welcome, my name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be about the levels command in Photoshop. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye and I'll show you why in a minute. And I actually prefer it to curves. Now there's two ways you can invoke it. You can go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, Command and Control L, and a lot of people reassign that keyboard shortcut to the adjustment layer levels. This would normally be destructive. But I've got a smart object, so it automatically creates a smart filter. You cannot have a smart filter without first having a smart object. Now, this is non-destructive, but the best way of using levels is with an adjustment layer because it doesn't increase the file size as much. Cancel. So if I went down here, I could click on this and go levels, or I can go adjustments, here, adjustments panel, click on the histogram. Or if I had a lot of time, I could go to layer, new adjustment layer and go levels. Before we go into levels, I need to show you 4 commands that are available to you in levels. You just can't see them. And I think they're very important. So under image, auto tone, contrast and color, and adjustments, brightness and contrast. First, auto tone. What that does is it looks at each channel individually, red, green and blue, makes the darkest pixel black, makes the whitest pixel white, gets rid of a color cast, and it could or can introduce a color cast. I know you're not going to remember this, but I need to cover it quite quickly. Also, we've got auto contrast, which clips each channel, red, green and blue, by the same amount, clips black and white by 0.5%. Then it maps the pixels to pure white and black. It won't add or remove a color cast. So it's all about contrast, all about luminosity. The final one in the auto range is auto color, and this works on the composite channel. So under channels here, it works on the red, green and blue channel, the composite channel. It locates the darkest pixel and turns it a neutral black, locates the lightest pixel and turns it a neutral white, locates the most mid-tone pixel and turns it a neutral grey. So that on the scale of 0 to 255, so 0 is black here, 255 is white, 128 is neutral grey, that is 50% grey. Just the last one is image, adjustments, brightness and contrast. If you press auto now, and it's a really good command this, it's the same as pressing auto in levels unless you've changed it. So cancel. So let's put an adjustment layer on, levels here. Let's explain it first before I go to those commands, which is the auto, color, etc., etc. Under the panel menu, you've got auto select parameter. That means when you open up this adjustment layer, it will be highlighted in the first box you can type in. If you turned it off and went away from it and came back in, you can see it's not highlighted. Turn it back on, click away, come back in. You can start typing in that box and then use the tab key to go about. Kind of useful. You can save a levels preset or load a levels preset. I've never saved a levels preset ever. Auto options, and I'll cover this in more detail, is those auto, color, contrast and tone. But anyway, I will cover them in a minute. I'm just saying the panel menu has access to them. Show clipping for black and white points. When you move the sliders, you'll see colors representing clipping. Best not ticked here, best done by pressing the Alt option key, and I will show you that in a minute. Reset levels is also down here. You can reset your levels. You made changes. You can reset them back to default. Close to close the panel or close the complete tab group. Right, presets. Let's pick one like increase contrast 3. You thought I could reset it here, but I can't. So the reset button is here without the eye icon. So the downward pointing arrow, you can reset it like so. I've never used a preset. I don't find them that useful at all because every image is different. So anyway, RGB. So that's the composite channel, red, green and blue. So red, green and blue. So normally you'd be on the RGB, but if you want to get rid of a color cast, you'd work in individual channels, and I will cover that. Auto, as I said to you, will be image, adjustments, brightness and contrast, auto. Simple as that. So back to the levels. So if I clicked it now, that's what it would do. It will do auto, brightness and contrast. So Let's reset it by coming down here. If you press the Alt Option key, which is the best way of doing it, you'll bring up that auto color correction options, which I'll cover in more detail in a minute, but that is the same as auto options there. The eyedroppers are for selecting what you think is the darkest point, the mid-tone grey point, and the whitest point. Yes, I did used to use them in the old days. We don't need to now. I would advise you not to use them, except for the mid-tone one for finding mid-tone grey, and that normally gets rid of a colour cast. It's done a reasonable job, actually. So you can see it's turned bluer there. It's got rid of the orange colour cast. Let's reset it. So I would not advise you using them. What we used to do is run a threshold adjustment to find the white and dark parts of the image, and then once we found them, we come and click with the eyedropper and do it like that. Far too fiddly and far too time consuming. We've altered the histogram. You have to update it by clicking on that symbol there if you see that symbol. Black slider here. If you move it in, let's say to 32, anything below 32 to 0, which is black, will be made black. From 32 to 0 will be black. Same for the whites. Anything from 181 up to 255 for white will be white. The mid-tone slider is a gamma slider. It works on exponent math system, so it's to a power of. By default, let's reset it. It's on 1, to the power of 1. So if you went to 2, let's say, it's to the power of 2, it's made it much brighter. And you can take it right down to whatever. So it works on that system. If you want to read about it, go to Wikipedia and read about gamma. But it's just a mid-tone slider, and that's all it really does. It cannot clip the highlights or the shadows, so it is quite a useful slider. 1 for default. So output levels, if you bring the black one in, you won't be working on anything. Let's say 29 down to 0 is black, will not be included. So you're sort of excluding that luminosity range. The same for the white ones. You're unlikely to ever use that at all. The clipping symbol here, very, very important, because when you get good at Photoshop and you start compositing images together, the clipping means you're only going to affect the layer below. So when I click on it, no matter what transparency I had on that layer, for either via blend modes or opacity, I will not affect the layer below it, only the layer directly below the adjustment layer. You can also press the Alt Option key, come between the two layers, you'll see the symbol there, click on it to get rid of it, click on it to bring it back. So let's turn it off. Very, very useful. Also, if I made any changes here, I can see the before and after by just clicking like so. Let's reset it. So the resetting one is there. It's for the visibility. If I click it off there, it turns off the visibility of the adjustment layer. The final one will trash the layer completely. As I said, auto, if you press the Alt Option key, you bring up the auto color correction options. If you mouse over the first one, enhance monochromatic contrast, at the end, you'll see auto contrast. So those ones, we saw up there, it's exactly the same thing. Mouse over enhance per channel contrast, auto tone. Mouse over find dark and light colors, auto color. Enhance brightness and contrast is, as I said, image adjustments, brightness and contrast, but auto, cancel. So back to the levels adjustment layer. Alt Option key kept pressed, or you can come to the panel menu and choose it. So all you have to do now is go through and find the one you like. So that's not bad. Well, the enhanced monochromatic contrast will never change the colors, so it's not doing a lot for me. The auto tone one, the enhanced by channel contrast, not bad. Find light and dark colors, auto color, I think that's the best. Now, I said that the auto color, if you mouse over this, it says make the nearest pixel to 50% gray, 50% gray. So it's part of auto color, but here you have to tick it. And it only works on the first 3. If you're using any of the first 3, I recommend you do tick that. So now I know that's the one that's really worked for me. So if I click on Save as Defaults, that becomes the auto. So I can choose my own auto settings. I don't recommend you do that because you'll forget you've done it and you wonder why auto isn't working like it used to. Now, Shadows, midtones and highlights. The shadows are clipped by 0.1%. Same for the highlights. That means 0 for black here, 255 for white is brought in by 0.1%. That will help you because pure black doesn't have any detail in it like pure white, especially on a photograph. You can change the color of things here by clicking on that and doing all sorts of things, but that's not the best place to do it. Now, people that work in CMYK do use this when they're going out to commercial printers, but for most photographers, you don't need to use it. As I said, you can save your own defaults and that will override that auto button. So I'm going to click on it one more time. We'll come here and go auto options. I'm going to stick with that one there and snap the neutral midtones and go OK. So that's not bad. I quite like that. So I've not really done a lot to that image and already it's looking quite good. But I'm going to reset it and show you something else. When you're working on the RGB channel, when you start moving those sliders in, if you've got show clipping for black and white points, you'll start seeing these colors and I need to explain them. Now on highlights, it's reasonably logical. Black means no clipping. Red means clipping in the red channel, green in the green channel, blue in the blue channel, yellow in red and green. If you know your color theory, it's all right. Cyan for green and blue, magenta for blue and red. If you look at the color here, like let's say when we're working in the shadows, for instance, it's all reversed. So white means no clipping. Cyan means clipping in the red channel. Well, cyan's roughly around there. Cyan's roughly around there. Opposite side is red. So for magenta, which is roughly around there, opposite side is green. So you can work it out, but you're not going to remember it. When I did my Adobe Certified Expert exam, they asked me that question. When you see yellow, what's being clipped in the shadows? You just have to know your color theory, try and remember the wheel, and I got there because it's the blue channel, but I really had to think about it. So blue means clipped in red and green, red means clipped in blue and red, etc., etc. And black means clipped in all channels. So that's only when you're working on the composite channel. So if I start moving the shadows in now, you'll see all sorts of color like yellow appearing, cyan, etc. So it is quite useful. Maybe it's quite useful. And for the highlights, you'll see those colors. But when you're working in individual channels like red, green or blue, you'll only see red and black, etc., or green and black, etc. So why would you go into the individual channels? Let's reset everything. If you want to get rid of a color cast yourself, you could use those eyedroppers, but the best way is this. In the red channel, you can see the histogram is really up against both edges. So it really is pointless working on this channel. In the green one, I've got a tiny amount there. So Alt or Option key kept pressed, or make sure you've got that show clipping for white and black points on. But I prefer Alt or Option key kept pressed. Start bringing it in. You'll see green appear in the image. And it's over on that side there. You'll see it over there. And when you start seeing that, you stop. I know it's no point moving that, so I'm not going to move it. In the blue channel, huge gap. So this is what we used to do in the old days, and it does work to get rid of a color cast. You bring it in, and when you start to see a bit of blue anywhere, and I can't see it at the moment, so I'm wondering where it's going to appear. It's going to appear over there, so it's not underneath my panel. It's not in the way. So when I start to see blue, I'm going to stop. Tiny amount of blue. No point doing it at that end because the histogram is butted up against it. So if I press the before and after here, before with the orange color cast, after. It's got rid of the orange color cast really well. So that's the levels command, guys. Just Alt or Option clicking on there will save you a lot of hassle, honestly. Now, Adobe Camera Raw kind of negates you having to use levels. But the great thing about adjustment layers is having the layer mask. I could paint out in here with a brush, let's say, and paint out areas I want more orange. So that's the big use of it, really, when you're compositing images together and doing this type of thing, selective edits. So I would say it's far better than curves because curves, in my personal opinion, is far too fiddly to use. And when you get expert at Photoshop, you start going towards curves because you think, well, it's got more control. You do have more control, but it's very easy to mess up things and make things look awful. It really is. I think levels is far easier to use and does the job just as good, in my personal opinion. So that's it, guys. I hope you got something from this. Levels, for me, really good. not necessary most of the time now, because with Adobe Camera Raw, you can get rid of color cast quite easily with the temperature sliders, etc. But when you're working with JPEGs and TIFFs, it's still the way I actually get the tonality right of my photographs, and I remove color cast. Thank you very much.